Alright, AP Human Geography students, here's our next unit, agriculture. And what we're going to focus on is, well, you get it, farming. That's right, but first we're going to focus on, where did agriculture originate? Excellent question, Mr. Molinaro. Well, first, let me tell you this. Let's focus on MDCs versus LDCs for a second, because we've just been talking so much about them. Alright, so agriculture, depending on the country, depends on economic and cultural factors, such as physical environment, right? Can't cultivate the same thing everywhere. Climate, that also affects what you can grow. Dietary preferences, perhaps some cultures eat, let's say, more grains than others. Availability of technology, obviously more MDCs are going to have better technology to harvest crops than LDCs. And also cultural traditions, perhaps food is directly linked to cultural practices. Well, in MDCs, they only contain 2% of the world's farmers, yet they have commercial farming. And what this is MDCs produce a large surplus of food that's mainly sold in market around the country, around the world, using technology. LDCs, which roughly contain 97% of the world's farmers, well, they barely produce enough food for themselves, with sometimes little surplus called subsistence farming, and these crops are really consumed by the family that grows them, or they're sold in a nearby market. Alright, so let's get to agriculture. What is agriculture? Well, it's the deliberate modification of the Earth's surface through the following: the cultivation of plants, right, growing, harvesting, and the rearing of animals, domestication of animals, using them, let's say, maybe for meat. And agriculture, two main purposes, again, are for subsistence, to live off of, or economic gain. Alright, so where did agriculture originate? Well, obviously, before agriculture, before permanent settlement, came hunter-gatherers. Now, around 10,000 years ago, after the last ice age, we see that people began to settle down and create communities through farming. One of the earliest harvests we can trace is in Southwest Asia, where barley and wheat began to be produced here. Now, from Southwest Asia, the practice of agriculture or farming diffused east to Central Asia and then to Europe. Now, Central Asia, of course, is known for its domestication of rice. Now, Central and East Africa, during the same time, domesticated sorghum, yams, millet, and rice independently of Southwest Asia, which is interesting. So you see these two hearths emerging at the same time, independent of one another. So where are some other hearths of agriculture? Well, Latin America is another place. In Mexico, around 4,000 to 5,000 years ago, they began to grow beans and cotton. And in Peru, their staple hearth was potato. In North America, in specifically the southeastern part of the United States, they grew squash and maize, or aka corn. And thus agriculture, the whole point of this, has multiple origins, multiple hearths in different regions, depending on climate, physical environment, so on and so forth. So what also was happening around the same time was domestication of animals. So now we have domestication of animal hearths. In Southwest Asia, where we just started talking about, cattle, goats, pigs, and sheep, roughly 8,000 to 9,000 years ago, began to be domesticated, either to be used on farmland or actually to be eaten. Dogs as well were domesticated roughly 12,000 years ago for other purposes such as hunting. If we look at Central Asia, they were the first to domesticate the horse, mostly for transportation use and also for war, and this happened roughly 5,000 years ago. Alright, subsistence farming. This is mostly found in LDCs, and what this process is, it's the production of food primarily for the consumption of the farmer's family, and again, little surplus is sold to local markets. Now, use of animals are substituted for the lack of technology to cultivate the land, like in MDCs. You can see here, for example, we have oxes and we have donkeys that are pulling plows to cultivate the land. Now, versus MDCs, which have commercial agriculture. And again, these are found in MDCs. They're primarily owned by one main family. Now, the production of food is primarily for sale off the farm. It's not really used for people who live on the farm. They use high-power machinery to cultivate large plants of land through the following means: GPS, for use for planting seeds, precise locations, the use of fertilizers and pesticides, and the use of transportation technology. Now, the average land size of a farm in the United States is 449 acres. What that means to you is that's about 0.7 miles of farmland per farm. It's crazy. Now, what's the problem with commercial farming? Prime agricultural land has minimized due to urban sprawl, right? Again, there's only 2% of the world's farmers are located in MDCs. Now, the reason why is because these countries are becoming more and more urbanized versus LDCs. So what's another name for commercial farming? Well, it's agribusiness. Now, agriculture and MDCs are integrated into large food production industries. So it goes from the farm to the following places: food processing, packaging, storing, distributing, retailing. It's a business in MDCs. Whereas LDCs, you're either focusing on one main product or domestication of an animal, and you're not really selling it to anybody or mass producing it. All right, so in MDCs, this also can include other enterprises, just tractor manufacturing, fertilizer production, seed distribution, right? Even these watering machines in the picture to the right here. It's a business in MDCs, right? Whereas in LDCs, it's used to survive. All right, quick intro into agriculture. We'll talk more about this in class. See you then.